I'm Wade Roush. I'm a business and technology journalist in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I will be your moderator for today's discussion. Okay, now I'd like to walk you through our topic for today and then introduce you to our panelists. So, as the title of the webinar says, we're going to be talking today about how citizen developers, meaning the domain experts inside your own organization, can create the apps that your business needs to keep growing and innovating without risking your organization's security and data privacy. So over the last decade or so, we've seen the emergence of low-code or no-code programming tools that make it possible for non-programmers to write simple apps or programs that make their jobs easier without having to wait around for the professional developers in the IT department to help out. I'll just give one example from a recent Harvard Business Review study. One electrical utility needed a better way to track all the equipment that they would need after a storm to make repairs. There just wasn't time after these storms for old-fashioned paperwork, so the utility made a Google form that their utility crews could update from their mobile devices, which is a super simple and early example, but and today's low-code or no-code applications can be much more powerful and subtle. The point being, though, nobody needed to get the IT department involved to create that Google Doc. So the danger also is that nobody needed to get the IT department involved, right? Without professional oversight, non-experts could easily wind up creating apps that expose customer data, or if they make enough of these little apps, they could wind up creating a kind of like shadow infrastructure that would be really hard for anyone to maintain or track. And that's why IT departments have traditionally not been too excited about the idea of citizen development. But maybe, just maybe, it's possible to have your cake and eat it too. Maybe there are ways of governing low-code and no-code apps so that citizen developers get the benefits of scale without the risks of bad security or bad practices. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So now I want to bring on our two guest speakers and introduce you to them. First, I'd like you to meet Richard Jefts. Richard is the Vice President and General Manager at HCLSoftware. He spearheads HCL's extensive portfolio in digital transformation solutions, encompassing low-code development, collaboration tools, and customer experience solutions. With a career spanning over 2 decades, Richard has proven success in executing clear organizational visions and strategies. I'd also like you to meet Richard's colleague, Andrew Manby. Andrew is the Vice President of Product Management in HCLSoftware's Digital Solutions business unit. He's responsible for product and market strategy in the application development portfolios, including Volt, MX, and Domino. Andrew has also held senior roles in analytics, data management, and data integration markets for organizations like VMark Software, Informix, Essential Software, and IBM. Okay, so Richard and Andrew, it is great to have you both here, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Wade. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with
Great
you.
to have you here. Thanks. The plan today is I'll turn things over to you for a presentation, and along the way, we will pause for a few interactive polls. And then depending on how much time we have left, we'll have a moderated discussion, and I'll ask you to hit on a few questions that I've been thinking about. And then we'll go to audience questions. But just to get everyone warmed up, let's start right now with our first poll. So here's the question. To what extent has your organization implemented citizen development? Please vote on one of these. So A, we haven't started, but we expect to do so. B, we're in the research planning phase. C, we've done a pilot with one or a few business units. D, we've adopted the approach organization-wide. Or E, we have no plans to implement citizen development. So go ahead and vote. Right now I'm looking at these charts and it looks like no plans is actually in the lead. But second is we haven't started, but we expect to do so. Well, I bet you some of the folks who are listening today might change their minds after they hear that citizen development isn't going to destroy their organization. But yeah, so it's interesting. So the farther you get down the process, the fewer people are doing this. Apparently, you've got more people at the beginning stages. So what does that say to you, Richard and Andrew?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, I'm not surprised at this. I think many organizations are looking at that transition from pro code application development of really engaging developers and fully understanding what does it mean to empower my broader organization, right? And that's what I think citizen development really delivers, is it allows you to leverage the power, the intelligence, the innovation of your broader organization. But there are, as noted, you did a very nice job, Wade, of noting of there are concerns, right? And I will maybe just briefly speak for ourselves. We actually have adopted citizen development organizationally wide. We're big believers of what's the term of drinking your own champagne, I guess you could say. So we truly leverage our products internally. And just a simple example, and I thought your example on that energy and power company was a customer of ours, by the way, because we have that exact example for one of our customers in the New England area, who's a power and energy company who's built a very similar application in the past. But for us, a simple example is we actually have part of our marketing team who have been building citizen development applications that are leveraged across the entire organization. These people do not have a development background, and they were able to actually build these apps in a very short period of time on their own. And now those applications are part of our broader every day of work that we have right now. Andrew, any comments from what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's a great setup there, Richard. I think many organizations we come across have got to make that jump across the chasm. And certainly there's definitely a transition in organizations thinking about implementing low code to do some of those pixel perfect applications. But they're trying to get bedded down on those types of implementations and governance, and then start thinking about citizen development. But for some organizations, it's not relevant, right? But for other organizations, there's places they could do that on the factory floor.
Right.
We have one customer building things in consumer products manufacturing. We have people doing things in the university education space, building the whole curriculum systems out in it as well, where the people building it are, frankly, the lecturers, the professors, and the students building out the content. It's not a bunch of developers in the back office. So, yeah.
Excellent.
Great. Well, we're looking at a slide here that's sort of the first part of your presentation. It's about the modes of application development. And so you can kind of look at the two axes here, and number of developers on one axis, number of applications on the other. And the bonus of citizen development seems to be that you can have lots of developers and lots of applications and still keep it all under control.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Wade, because you really hit on a couple key points here. The first one being that this really represents the full spectrum of how companies are embracing application development today. So you really have that evolution that's occurring from true pro code, people who have, they have software development backgrounds. And frankly, this is one of the areas where citizen development is a leverage point of, you're not having to spend all that money on the software developers, right? You're going much broader. Frankly, you have the access of many more people's views, perspectives, which we know, back to the real point of this discussion, is about innovation. As you expand and give more people the ability to iterate and put their own ideas in place, that will drive innovation across an organization. And we would say that many companies today are really in that assisted development area, really, as you saw in the poll, starting to better understand what does it mean to leverage citizen development, and how do I put those frameworks or those boundaries around it to ensure that it does not become a challenge for the IT organization in the very near future.
Yeah.
Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing is, I don't know about the people, tuning in and watching our webcast. I mean, no code isn't something new. It's been around a long time, and organizations have been been getting the benefit of it for decades. But what's actually different is, as you were saying in the beginning, Wade, it's really about trying to make sure you have, you're making sure you're not ending up with too much IT complexity, making sure you don't have shadow IT, the data privacy, and you have the IT control. I think that's really what's changed. This diagram is in some ways is us being sort of provocative and saying that, there's lots of people working with business users to build professional-based applications with an IT team. But that's going to work for a certain segment of those applications. And there's this big backlog that the organization's not getting to. So then you think to yourself, like we had, is if you give them the tools, they will go and build that for you. And I think the difference is getting out of that waterfall fusion team mindset. You've always got to do that. You've got to build a fusion team. You've got IT only building something and citizens who are actually advising. The difference here is we're adding this assisted development that basically says for a group of applications, maybe they are employee experience applications, maybe there are temporary situational apps and workflow approvals, they should be able to do them themselves. And IT's role is to make sure that the governance underpinnings that they've implemented in their low-code tools is also available to their citizen development tools, so they don't have to worry about some of the governance aspects. And IT is more of a supportive role opposed to taking the requirements and building it. And I think it's that mindset that we've enabled. Now, organizations today are saying, well, let me pick one professional development tool and pick one citizen development tool. But there are people like ourselves out there who go, well, we have a platform that does all of those, all of it. And really what's important is the governance and the IT assistance, and how do you enable that? And we've seen some great results. I mean, we've got customers who have tens of thousands of users and thousands of applications on the platform.
Can I ask I guess this is a somewhat mischievous question or a pushback question, but how do you create room for 1,000 flowers to bloom? How do you let citizen developers roam free and create the apps they want on whatever platform makes the most sense for them, and simultaneously provide good governance? I guess that's the part that's still kind of vague in my mind.
Well, I think what we've seen, right,
Yes.
in the past is that the IT organization will at times determine what is that one platform way that they're going to focus on. I think where Andrew started to talk on this specific slide is many of those products out there today don't cover this full spectrum. So they end up having to choose multiple platforms, right, for different types of outcomes. And so what we've actually seen is first, there's a bit of a resistance from IT of, oh no, we're going to open this up and it's going to get out of control. We do, within the software itself, have the ability to have the checks and balances in place, meaning I know how often that app is leveraged. Yes. I know how often who has access to that application. And frankly, where does that application get its data from, yes, which is one of the other key aspects as well. And so they do have the controls in place, the checks and balances to be able to validate those things. It almost comes down to, in my view, a bit of a cultural shift, which is always the really hard aspect that you have within an organization, is shifting that control and governance, yeah, to allowing for that innovation and that flexibility. And many organizations struggle with letting go of that control. And what we've seen is that's where people tend to get stuck, right? Is they'll actually build a set of apps, and then IT wants to kind of lash around and control them. In the areas we've seen success with this is where IT just feels much more comfortable with the checks and balances, trust but validate, and ensure that you're not exposing yourself, but allowing that broader organization to build that innovation, new outcomes and new thoughts. As an example, our marketing team has a very different view than our documentation team in many scenarios. So the end outcome can be very, very different if you leverage the broader organization, which will in turn drive innovation from what we've seen.
Yeah. I mean, maybe one way to conceptualize it, and this is like an analogy that, we like to use, is that, with an IT team, you're going to code something, right? You're going to code, you're going to go to that level of granularity. You're worried about security, authentication, REST services, those types of things, right? If you're doing the citizen development right, as Richard was saying, what you're doing is you're giving the themes, the widgets, you're giving them the feedback mechanisms, you're giving them the ability to work for IT where they need to extend it. But think about it almost like they've got big blocks of Lego. and those blocks of Lego are specific to their function. So Reggie gave the marketing example. So when we give access to our citizens development tool for the marketing team, what they see is their view, and they see the integration with our marketing automation stack. So for the types of things they're doing, which is, people registering for webinars,
Right.
data collection, handing off leads, that type of thing. All of the components are there, and they're immersed in the look and feel, so they can actually make that solution readily. Now, is that the same set of Lego blocks that I would give to someone in our CEE team who's in a customer-facing CSM type role? No, you give them a different type of blocks and maybe integrate with our CRM application. And maybe that's different yet again for our salespeople, who are much more interested in our price list and actually creating a product configurator. So I think if you really want to get the governance and get the best benefit, is by group, figure out what are those Lego blocks and have IT enable them.
That's great. I happen to love building with Legos, and the thing about Legos is they all fit together, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Big system.
Yeah.
Is this a good moment to transition to maybe the second audience poll?
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Wade.
Okay, let's do that. Okay, here's the second question. So what is your organization's approach to integrating AI with citizen development? So we're moving the story along here, talking about AI. A, we're cautious and or monitoring trends. B, we're currently prototyping. C, we have targeted a deployment date. D, we're already using the combination today. E, we don't know or not applicable. So let's watch the votes come in.
This should be interesting.
Yeah, not a surprise.
No.
Yeah, the votes are coming in a little faster this time. It looks like A and B are in the lead. Well, okay, not counting, again, the majority of people haven't started doing this yet. So they're here to learn, basically. But it looks like there's a fair number of people who are sort of monitoring trends, and then a few people who have started to prototype. And again, a cautious approach it's not surprising to me that's what's happening here. Does this track with what you guys are seeing in your customer base?
Yeah, I would say that many of them are more at the currently prototyping. And Wade, I'm sure you've seen this as well, is that AI is a top priority for almost every organization out there right now. And that doesn't mean that how do I use AI? It's really better understanding the outcomes that AI can drive for me as an organization. And so, what we're seeing is many companies leveraging artificial intelligence to better understand what those outcomes will actually derive. And I'll give you a simple example. We have the capabilities today of leveraging artificial intelligence with our citizen development platform today. What we can actually do with AI is build a prototype or a template of an application. So something that used to take maybe, could take upwards of weeks to actually do, now you're getting an outcome or an example within seconds. But I will say this, that what we've also found is that if I try to build that same prototype or beginning application 5 or 6 hours later, I may get a different set of results. So it's still learning. It's learning that fast, by the way, as it's going on and evolving. And so, I'm again not surprised that many companies right now are really trying to prototype again of what is the expected outcome and how is AI going to actually derive solving a problem for me. And again, for us at least, what I think the biggest one up to this point is building those templates. We all know it's really hard. I'll just even use PowerPoint as an example. It's really hard to build a strong PowerPoint presentation by yourself, right? But when you have an example or somebody's given you their version 1, boy, is it a lot easier to actually expand on that, evolve it, update it, change it. And that's really a lot of where we see the leveraging of AI today within citizen development, is speeding up the beginnings of being able to build that application.
Yeah, I think, Wade, that's actually the subject. If we go to the next slide, maybe you can use that to elaborate, because That's a great setup, right? So it's, Richard, I mean, it's really in three buckets here.
Yeah, look, I think as I touched on, the automated app creation is a big one, right? That we've seen over and over again. Frankly, for us, I'll look at AI in two modes from a developer productivity. We leverage AI today internally when we build software, right? So we leverage, as an example, Copilot to actually drive velocity and make improvements within our development organization. So writing software faster, writing cleaner software, writing software that is smaller, right? Not 100 lines of code, but maybe 10 lines of code. And that's another area that we've seen a lot of productivity improvements within our development team. Now, do you want to touch on the data aspect of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a data geek as well as building stuff. So the first area is really around data capture, right? A lot of citizen developer apps are about collecting content, right? And using Gen AI is a fantastic tool at that point to electively to say, is what I collected, is it good? Can I enrich it? Can I make it actually more rewarding and interesting? And also really helping to automate some of that data capture. So that's all goodness. Frankly, it can also help with the analysis as well. Because I don't know about you, I have HomeKit at home, and I tell Siri to switch on the lights, open the garage door, and all the rest of it. You add two commands together, it doesn't know. It says stop, don't do it, right? I'm confused. But the promise of using some of those prompts to say, this is the type of question I have, get this from my database to answer the question, is a hell of a lot easier than using SQL, and a lot easier than trying to learn multiple business intelligence tools. So the point I mentioned about Siri is, whether it's natural language processing or whatever, or you're typing it through prompts, that's the way it's going to collect information to enable a query. It could also be a search, at the end of the day. So I think that's really making things great. Do you want? I think you touched developer productivity. I was going to add another thing to it.
Sure. Go ahead.
Translation, right? Translation is something that we have in our products. Making it easy for organizations to, if they're based in Japan, build an application for China or Indonesia or something. There's something that developers don't like to do a lot of, which is the D word, documentation, right? And it can actually really help in that area. And then really around the thing I wanted to say about automated app creation is, like you said, it gets you so far and it will improve over time. But I think the developer productivity is the holy grail. Just suggesting this data, maybe I want to build an app around customer data. I shouldn't have to worry about, okay, I need this REST API and this piece of the data in this query. What I need to do is just say, oh, I need a customer object, and therefore it appears in my development. So there's some great things. The one other thing I would say here is citizen development, or the citizen orientation, is actually pervasive. I know we're talking about it today from an app dev perspective, but that citizen orientation, there's a citizen data scientist, there's citizen development orientation in DevOps. And what I like about all of this is it's making it more approachable to a different audience by implementing a very similar paradigm of making it really easy for people to use what they have, and then fueling that with AI to get a better result faster.
For people in the audience who maybe haven't started to integrate AI into citizen development yet, I wonder if you can offer an example, because it seems to me that a lot of these generative AI tools are super powerful, but they don't have great APIs, or there aren't a lot of obvious tools for non-developers to use to tap into them. So it feels like it would be hard to build a really great citizen app that taps into a model like ChatGPT, for example, without help from IT. But maybe I'm behind the times. Maybe that is becoming possible.
I wouldn't say you're behind the times. I think that would be too bold of a statement, Wade. But I would say this, that we are leveraging ChatGPT from a citizen development perspective today. And so, if you use ChatGPT, then you know that you can actually simply describe what type of application you want. And from an expense application that has, not only dollars, but say rupees in it or something like that, it will build the foundations for you pretty close to what you're describing. And then it comes down to, how do I build on top of that? That's the next step that we're working on very closely with our development team. But I think, to your point, it's evolving. It's evolving, and back to the point I was making earlier, your results literally change almost within hours based on what it is learning, how it's actually adjusted. And so for us, I think, this is just the next step within true, application development. And we have the capabilities of leveraging ChatGPT and others across the entire platform that we have today.
Yeah, I can think of a couple of other examples, just a very simple one, right? You're trying to build an application, and maybe you're importing images, right? And you want to be able to make sure you know what the description of the image is, right? Computer vision integration is something now, it's so easy. It will tell you, well, it looks like a green front door. Right? So then, you can do a search for, in your application, a green front door, because you've derived the meta tags by using the generated AI capabilities.
Okay, that's a great example. I would still like to see more of these in action to know what we're really talking about. And again, it does feel like an area where there might need to be an ongoing conversation between professional IT and citizen developers, because citizen developers, let's face it, they're not the ones building or fine-tuning these models, but they are going to want to tap into them. So, right, there needs to probably be an ongoing conversation.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I think that's where the IT assistance comes in, right? You can imagine sitting down and the business person saying, I have a particular need to do this. And then the IT figures out, well, that looks like a Gen AI thing in one of these three areas here. Let's take something, plug it into your Lego toolkit. We're going to give you that special Lego block that does this one thing, and then you just keep reusing it again and again and again.
Super. Okay, maybe we should go to the third audience poll right now. Okay, poll question 3. What are your organization's key concerns about citizen development? Is it, and you can vote for more than one in this case, cost, complexity, gaps in skills and training, lack of IT governance, onboarding more platforms, or security and compliance?
Could have predicted that one.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so it's updating. At the moment, gaps in skills and training is in the lead. Lack of governance is right behind, and that doesn't surprise me at all. We're getting more votes, and the proportions are staying about the same. So, no. Security and compliance is jumping way ahead. Okay, I didn't see that bottom line until just now. All right, so I think this is settling down, so we can tell right away that security and compliance are people's top concern, and I bet that doesn't surprise you guys.
No, not at all. No, and frankly, it's so important, right? Of having, again, as we had mentioned earlier, those guidelines, those frameworks in place. If you look at, for us specifically, when we look at certain geographies, this becomes even more relevant, by the way, right? So when we work with our customers in Europe, they have a lot more, what I would say, governance and compliance that are much more critical for them to adhere to. So we do hear this from them on a regular basis. Again, within our software, we have the capabilities of guiding that compliance, real time for those users at the end of the day, as well as providing them with the governance structure of usage, how many users, who is leveraging the data, who's leveraging the application itself. But I'm not surprised at that. I would say that the other one around gaps in skills and training is just an evolution of citizen development, right? And that comes down to, in reality, a true citizen development platform. Your skills that you have today are the ones that you'll be able to leverage. That's why it's a citizen development platform. Right. The training side, there's obviously, on every platform, there's opportunities to become more efficient. We provide certifications on our portfolio across the platforms. We provide regular webinars and training as well. And so, I believe this whole poll makes a whole lot of sense from our perspective on what we see every day.
Great. Well, this sets us up for the last 3 slides or so, right? Do you want to go back to the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So here we go. Well, take it away.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, okay.
You can
So this slide is really getting to some of the points that we're trying to sort of solidify for this presentation. And, as I mentioned that, we have customers who are doing this at significant scale, and we're going to talk about one of those next in the next slide. But in this slide here, where they've got thousands of applications, is organizations are probably going to take one of these 3 approaches, and maybe the first 2 columns here are restricted by all of those concerns that we just saw in the poll. So some people's approach is to just make it wide open, make it available to actually everyone. But there's risks, right, as everyone has attested to, around security and data privacy. But the benefit of actually doing that is, in an unrestricted way, is that people can go out and innovate and build whatever they like. But the danger is they can go out and build whatever they like, right? And there's no, sense of what's happened. Organizations similarly could adopt a limited approach, right, which is almost like sort of squeezing the citizen development deployment and only keeping it within a very small deployment with a department. We talked about marketing or our CSM, CE organization. But, there's a small number of projects and you really don't get the velocity that you need and the reward from the organization. So as you said, Richard, it's really about enabling a cultural shift, putting the governance and security in place, curating that. I've got this wonderful analogy, which I'll see whether it works for you. So I've tried the Lego one, right? So let's try another one. So we have a canteen downstairs, and it's soon going to be lunchtime. And I'm sure people are thinking about that too. And I have a couple of options, right? I can either buy a pre-made salad, right, and pay for that. I could go to the bar there, and I can actually ask them, and they'll tell me what's on the menu today, and they'll serve it up. They can make a custom sandwich for me. Or alternatively, imagine a salad bar, right? I like a salad bar. I'm sure many of you like salad bars. And the great thing about salad bars are everything is fresh. It's curated by the people in the cafeteria itself. And then it's up to me to compose what I want for that particular day and assemble my own salad and actually pay for it. So I think the most successful model is that salad bar model in the end, which is you make it available to everyone. The risk is lower because you put the best practices, you put the center of excellence, you empower the employees to share. I mean, frankly, we get people sharing, widgets and themes, components and ideas and bits of code and things that they've built with each other. But then you make sure that they have got those Lego blocks necessary to solve that solution. And if you think about it, that way you guarantee to get a good result every day. You leave it down to them to compose their individual solution. So we see, and it's across multiple organizations, whether it's in education, whether it's in auto manufacturing, whether it's in consumer goods production, whether it's in the beverage industry, whether it's frankly in gas pipelines. Citizen development stuff is applicable to all those areas, but you've got to put some of the mechanics and some of the basis in place and have a little bit of courage to make that step.
Makes total sense. I think you had a couple more slides you might have wanted to run us through, but we will be going to audience Q&A in just a couple of minutes. So folks who want to send us their questions, don't forget to do that using the Q&A tab on the right side.
Sure. So maybe, Wade, just to go back to your point of real world examples. So this is, hopefully many of you have flown on Lufthansa in the past. They are a key customer of ours. One example of a customer leveraging citizen development to what I would say, like, its full potential to a certain extent, right? And when we talk about to Lufthansa and they give us feedback, The interesting thing is that they're leveraging citizen development from simple applications like ordering their crew uniforms to event registration to even mobile applications that are around cleanliness surveys. So has the plane been cleaned? Has the lavatory? Yeah, the lavatory. All of those types of things. So very, very simple, but very, very important applications in order to drive a delightful experience for their customers. And that's an area that every airline is really focused on, is how do I differentiate myself? How do I make that experience very positive? Now, those simple apps, those are available to, well over 140,000 plus employees. But we've also seen Lufthansa actually leverage citizen development for complex applications. So from exception handling of cargo to overall safety checklist of before the plane actually leaves the gate itself. And then we've also seen Lufthansa not only leverage it for their customers, which is where we see a lot of these applications being leveraged and built, but they've leveraged it internally for their own employee experience as well. So they're leveraging this platform for vacation submission, for timesheets, for payroll, as an example, and as well as security clearance. So they've built applications around security clearance to ensure that the people that have access to certain things are the appropriate people. So, Andrew, you want to expand on this? I know you've spoken with Lufthansa as much as I have as well.
Yeah, there are really interesting cases you were saying, Richard. They've actually built over the course of 10 years, right? 10 years of doing citizen development, 11,500 applications, right? They currently have 2,500 in production today. And if you look at the curve, it's going up. But what I think is significant about the broader adoption and the number of apps is that, some of these apps have a shelf life, right? And if you like, that whole idea about citizen development, being able to get in there quickly, solve a business problem, it's going to run a course wherever long it takes, and then, it's going to retire and disappear at the end of the day. So they've done a phenomenal job of trying to do that. They've done a phenomenal job in actually building the wikis and the forums, the FAQs, a bit like ourselves, right, internally, to democratize the use of these capabilities across their business. And, I'm sure there's other ones that they don't tell us about, which are, specific to how they operate the airline specifically. But in terms of, you think about, two important in what we talk about all the time is digitization and the value of digital transformation. So where they're trying to empower the employee or create smarter worker type scenarios, those are things that organizations really care about. And citizen development isn't necessarily a thing by itself. It's an enabler to those types of initiatives.
All right, cool. Well, thanks. That really helps to have a concrete example like that. And if anybody can get this stuff off the ground, it's an airline, right? So joke. We have a whole bunch of audience questions coming in, and I want to unfortunately skip over that slide there and go right to the questions at this point. So we will continue to take folks' questions for the remainder of the hour. And again, you can submit those in the questions module. But I have a document here where I'm seeing some of these questions flow in. And here's one that I think is kind of interesting. Is there a minimum level of IT maturity, like having system integration, data warehousing, et cetera, before an organization should start citizen development? Or more generally, what are the prerequisites?
Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, so we the way we do it is we will stand up the solution. We'll put it in your data center, which is becoming rarer and rarer. We'll put it in whatever cloud of choice that you have, be that AWS, Azure, whatever, and really think about that as a service. It depends on the use case. Now, a lot of data and decisions move around in a thing called email. I'm sure people are familiar with that. Still, yes. And they use a thing called a spreadsheet, which is a common tool for collecting data. And so it could be as simple as saying, look, we have this, we do this all the time, right? someone builds a spreadsheet, if they haven't been acquainted with the tools, we take the spreadsheet, we import it, we create the application as a result of it, we import the data, and then we make it available. So in terms of, Wade, anything else that you need, that's it. That's all you need, right? Because it's a self-contained solution. And then you think to yourself, okay, well, what else do I need? What data is important to this application? Is it content? Is it insight? Is it something interactive? Maybe I need customer information from my Salesforce CRM solution. So it's very specific, but it's not like you have to sort of build all of this stuff at the back end. We include the integration layer with all the pre-built connectors so you can get going immediately.
Okay, great. Here's an interesting question. So is there a pathway here between citizen-developed applications and more IT-centric or IT-enhanced applications? That is, can you take an app out of the hands of citizens and migrate it onto a more mature platform? Does that happen inside organizations?
That's a really good question, by the way. And so I would say that, and Andrew can build on this as well, is look, what we've seen is that within our platform today, we have the capabilities of being able to do an import of a citizen development application. So the power of that, Wade, is I don't have to start all over again to make this kind of enterprise class, harden it, validate the APIs, what are the integrations, all of those types of things. So we are seeing a bit of an evolution, I would say, of what we would classify as universal development platform, meaning I, as a citizen developer, could build this application that all of a sudden you see huge adoption of. Hundreds of people, thousands of people are now adopting this. Well, lo and behold, as an IT organization, I'm going to want to look at that and go, wait a minute here. How do I harden this and make it really scale, fully secure, meet all those requirements that I want to broadly get this application to my employees or my customers at the end of the day? And so what we've seen is many platforms today don't have that capability. Many of them, it's a rewrite. I need to rewrite the whole thing all over again, unfortunately, and start from the beginning. We're fortunate enough within our platform to actually have those capabilities of importing that citizen development application and then hardening it into what I would classify as a true enterprise certified development app that is available to a broader team.
Yeah,
that is something that we hear almost every customer meeting we and partner discussion, by the way. So it's a really good.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly, Richard. I think I would just want to add one thing to say that, I can think of a financial institution in North America who uses the citizen development capabilities, and they use it for prototyping in their IT organization as well. Yeah. So, or they allow their business users to do that prototyping. And once they're happy with the concept has been articulated, so it isn't a bunch of stickies and it isn't, a verbal description, allow the business user to build a prototype, and then we can take it and then build that app and put it in the App Store. Right?
Great answer. Okay. Here's another question from the audience. How do you control for runaway code inventory? And what are some other examples of problems you can run into with citizen development, things you need to think about when you're building a platform like this?
You want to go first? Okay. I'll expand on that.
Yeah, so I'd like to sort of go back to the sort of governance topic, right? So I think that the governance is a bit like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So, for some organizations, it's enough to curate the widgets. It's enough to curate the data sources. Some organizations look, from an administrative perspective, what apps, as you were saying, Richard, who's using it. They'll scan the data. Some of them will even go as far as saying, for instance, we have one customer who sends out annually a thing called they want the end user to attest about their application, right? So some of them will, run through, why have you built this? Why are you building it? What's the purpose? And actually have the app go through an approval process with IT before it's published, right? Some of them will just say, that's fine, you can go ahead and publish it, but they'll want you to certify by going through a checklist and saying, okay, I have no PII data, I'm not doing this, I'm doing this, I'm going to use it for this purpose, and they'll do it. So I think some of those things are very, very specific. You know, on the code, more on the sort of code side, you know, I don't think you need perhaps some of the rigor around DevOps that you would do in the citizen development world, because it's about like a Word document. You've got versioning. You just go back to an iteration in time and just go and do it. So we certainly keep all of that stuff in our tool chains. We keep that information, so it's there. But from a user perspective, do they really care about it? And why force that sort of process on them when they don't really need it? I mean, their analogy should be like Word. Okay.
I think there were a couple key things that Andrew, focused on that are going to be really important, which is those integrations. What data do I have access to? Right. And you mentioned data numerous times.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things when these companies start to open it up, and having that governance structure, the compliance, the validation, that these are the integrations and APIs that are available to you, and these are the ones that are locked down. And that is like a level of maturity that we're starting to see within IT teams. Right. Of, wait a minute here, for this persona, for this user, they only have access to this. They're kind of locked down. And that, I think, is a key thing for many organizations to better understand is you don't want to let this get away.
Yes.
You know, when you looked at the Lufthansa example, you could almost say, geez, 11,000 plus applications. That seems a little unwieldy to me, right? If I put my IT hat on, I get a little bit concerned. Yeah. Who has access to it? What do they have access to? How often are they accessing it? And can I actually control and see that, right? Is one of the key things. So it really does, Wade, I think, come down to having that balance that we were talking about earlier of, in order to innovate within citizen development, you have to have a bit of a cultural shift where I don't want to be controlling everything that is going on as an IT team. I'm okay with these outcomes in these scenarios. And as I noted earlier, I think that is where companies tend to struggle, right? Is when they get to use it, they're prototyping it. We saw this in the surveys, right? And they're starting to move forward. And then all of a sudden the IT organization jumps in and goes, no, too much. And so getting that level of maturity to let go, I think, is something that we're seeing IT organizations become more receptive to.
And as you said as well, right? That point about, if IT does want to jump in because it's successful and change some things, then everything is retained. You know, the design of the applications retained, the data's retained, the connectivity piece of it, and the setup. So it's a complete reuse at that point. And if they want to add some other pieces, it's easy.
Thanks. Excellent.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, speaking of things that companies struggle with, we have had several questions coming in about data silos. And one of the questions goes, we have a lot of data silos in our company, and our subject matter experts control data more tightly even than the IT department. How do we bring along our departments to see the possibilities of collaboration? And I'm assuming they mean collaboration, involving citizen development.
Yeah. So, well, one way of doing it is to show them how much you can lock down and govern each one of those sources, right? Right. I mean, we're not talking about having full access to all of their data, right? There's compliance and privacy regulations, and Richard talked about the European Union. But there are subsets of that. If you're very tightly controlled and they're narrow, that effectively, think about the salad bar again. So under citizen development, what we do is we make a cadre of all of those sources available, and we can specifically lock down each individual data source, which is tailored for each individual group of users, right? So going back to that point, if people, you don't want to make available all the payroll and HR information from, say, Workday, but there's a small segment. Maybe you just want employee IDs, start date, because you're trying to build some anniversary app or something, or volunteer type app. There's no need for the rest of the data. And effectively what we're creating is a connection to the back end, and it's curated. So then the Leap admin the admin of the citizen development capability then says, right, this is appropriate for, say, Richard, and then he would see that in his collection of tools to build that particular application. So, but I think there's an embedded piece to that question about, well, what could the owners of the data expect from the business users? Well, I mean, hopefully all of those people live in an individual department, and they all must think about it every single day. I know with the things we do in product management, I know you do in the leadership team, Richard, there are things we want to know more about our customers. There are things we want to streamline processes. We want to make sure that before we go to the travel system, you get prior approval. There are always things like that we can take a look at. So maybe a brainstorming session, you know.
I'll even give you like another
yes.
a good one is, and it's moving in the direction you're
Yeah.
heading. Like, and Wade, when you talk about silos, one of the things we've seen from a best practice that works across organizations is getting those silos engaged into what we'll call a hackathon.
Yeah.
So if you do a hackathon internally and you get them to see the value that is derived from the access to that data, what you can actually build as a broader organization. You know, we've been able to do hackathons ourselves, but many of our customers do hackathons internally, and it's a great validation of the value and the outcome, but also that your risk is not as big as you initially think it is at first. So that's one thing that I know we've seen.
It's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, Richard, because I just want to add a funny anecdote. I know we did that with the sales acceleration team.
Yeah.
And do you remember what the first app was that they created? No, it was a lunch order app for those meetings that we had. So when we had a leadership team, they instead of being spreading out menus and what they wanted to eat, they built a lunchtime menu app. So effectively what they could do, they could use external services, which are all available at REST endpoints. They could build an integrated order for everyone in the room and just hit pay, and it gets delivered.
Yeah.
You guys are making me hungry with all of these food.
Yeah.
So we have one more. I'd like to get through one more, a pair of really interesting questions here. So, and they sort of go to the question of, when you say citizen development, how serious are you about that word citizen? And so the question is basically, can anyone in an organization simply decide to go out and build a citizen app? Or should the business give certain employees or groups permission, in a sense, to build apps? Related to that, second half of the question, how and where should citizen developers go to obtain the skills they would need to kind of get permission to start building apps?
You want to go again on this one, and I'll build on you?
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to Richard's hackathon idea, right? I think it's like launching any new tool that you have. Maybe you're using team-based collaboration. Maybe it's using online meeting tool, whatever. You've got to be able to launch it. You've got to be able to have letters from leadership. You've got to make resources available. You've got to train a couple of core black belts who can actually answer questions and have them in the center of excellence. And then give them an objective, right? And build some energy and build some momentum behind it. And the hackathons in a particular department are a great way to do that. And the great thing about doing this is, Wade, it's viral, right? Yeah. It does go viral. People want some of that. And before you know, from a product management standpoint, people are calling you saying, well, I'm building this app here. How do you do this? And then we say, well, okay, go and look over there. The wiki we have has all that information. We have a software learning LMS all around this particular type of content, and very simple samples we have in our marketplace to get started. So they have enough, as Richard was saying earlier, sort of say, oh, here's the sample app. It looks something like what I want to do. Let's copy that and modify it. Or I can learn some of the basics. But a lot of that material is very accessible. If you've got Excel skills, then you can build
an app.
You can build an app.
Look, I think the key for me, and I've put my IT hat, many years ago back into place here. I very rarely rolled out a new product, new software, new platform without doing a proof of concept, right? And without really fully engaging a controllable set of teams, line of business, to really identify what is the outcome, building my story so I can start to push that message out more broadly. And I think you used the term black belts.
Yeah.
I would use the term of champions.
Yeah.
So having people inside who actually use the products, they actually got the results, and then they can be the ones speaking to how their experience was, what they were able to build, what they were not able to build. The goal with citizen development, though, is to give it to everyone, right? That is the true power. Back to Wade, the context around this webinar is, if you're going to drive innovation, one of the key things around driving innovation is doing it in scale and being able to iterate, right? And being able to learn as fast as you possibly can. And that's where, I could see where if you try to control it too much, you're not going to get all the results that you're looking for. And so it really does, I hate to use the term again, but that culture of being able to go, okay, I will let go some of the controls, but I'm still going to be able to say, if I need to stop it, then I'm going to be able to do it with, one push of a button at that point.
Okay. We literally have 60 seconds left. I'd like to give you each a chance to just give a lightning answer. What's the one thing you'd like people to take away from today's discussion?
So I think for me, at least, I would say that it's time for you to embrace citizen development. Many companies are already moving in this direction. We see the opportunity and the results on a daily basis in the area, that not only from building the platform, but actually using the platform ourselves. And as we evolve it from an organizational perspective, you could see where you want the line of business to be much more engaged into what I am building internally and externally. And I think this is a great area for them to have that context. Andrew, you?
Yeah, that's a great answer. I would just say, just do it. You need, each organization needs to think about the formula that's going to work for their business, their department, their risk tolerance, and the way they want to run the governance, and then just move into trying it. I mean, some of the examples I mentioned as sort of customer examples, we talked about Lufthansa, these are major organizations embracing it, but we do have customers, very small customers, who are doing exactly the same. So it's really, unleashing the innovation is the most important point. So if you want more innovation in your organization, then let them do it. Don't expect to constrain them and expect innovation, because the two don't go together.
Wonderful. Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, but this has been a fantastic discussion, and I'd like to thank you, Richard and Andrew, for leading us through all these important topics. So thank you again, and thank you to our audience today for all of your questions. I'm afraid we didn't get through a bunch of the questions. There were some great questions I didn't get to ask. Okay, well, a final thank you to Richard and Andrew and our audience, and to HCL Volt MX for sponsoring today's webinar. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.